Market Leader Advanced. Coursebook by Ivona Dubicka and Margaret O'Keeffe. Published by Longman. CD 1. Unit 1. Being International. Recording 1.1. 1.
Last week, I was in Geneva giving a talk to executives from all over the world. And, you see, you simply can't take anything for granted. There's nothing like an international audience to make me see just how much slang I use. I guess I've always felt that it gives me a casual style that I think is fun and adds a personal touch. But after seeing their faces, I realized how inappropriate and insensitive it is for those who don't get the jokes. The next time I go abroad, I'm going to review my presentation and try to avoid words and expressions that might mean nothing to the listeners. I guess I'll have to remember to schedule some time to have one of my international colleagues review my talk for me.
2.
I always like to do some research to find out what the local customs are when I'm giving a presentation abroad. One interesting thing I discovered recently on a trip to Bangkok is that in a meeting it's customary to seat VIPs in the front row. Anyway, I normally like to have a semicircular theatre-style room set up whenever I can. In my Bangkok talk, when I found out approximately how many VIPs there would be, I arranged for the front row to be set with plush chairs that were sort of nicer and different than the rest of the chairs we were using. I also made sure that the important people were escorted to their seats. I could tell that this small gesture was very well received and helped to pave the way for a very productive speech. It's not a major issue. I mean, after all, Thais are used to westernized meetings these days. But I'm sure that, recognizing this type of custom and making some effort to adhere to it can earn you some real points with the people that count.
3.
I've found that, in my experience, people around the world respond differently to presentations. I thought I was putting them to sleep once in Japan, but then somebody told me that it's common there to show concentration by closing your eyes and nodding your head up and down slightly. Then again, maybe I really was boring them. And while you might think applause is a universal sign of approval, there are exceptions. I've found that in parts of Germany and Austria, listeners sitting round a table may show their approval by knocking on the table. And another thing, if you wave goodbye when you've finished your presentation in Argentina, the members of the audience might all turn round and come back to sit down. To them, the wave means, hey, come back. Knowing what to expect with questions is another point. Nodding your head in Bulgaria actually means no. So think about that if someone asks you a question. Americans and Canadian and many European audiences will almost always ask questions. But in most Asian cultures, audiences are more likely to greet your presentation with silence.
Recording 1.2.
Excuse me, but you're Professor Slavinsky, aren't you?
That's right, but please call me Conrad. And you are...
Melanie Burns.
Nice to meet you, Melanie.
Pleased to meet you too. I really enjoyed your talk, Professor. I mean, Conrad.
Did you? That's very kind of you to say so.
I thought what you said was fascinating, especially the importance of marketing and product adaptation for the Southeast Asian market.
Did you think so?
Oh, yes, absolutely. There are so many cultural considerations when entering new markets.
That's right. But what about yourself? Are you giving a talk at the conference?
Yes, just a short seminar.
Oh, really? When will you be speaking?
Tomorrow afternoon at 5 p.m.
Oh, that is a shame. I'm afraid I'm leaving tomorrow afternoon. I've promised I'd be home in time to attend our son's basketball match.
That's a coincidence. My daughter is crazy about basketball. But it's a pity you're going to miss my talk.
Well, you know, family commitments. What's it going to be on, by the way?
How companies need to adapt their company culture in the light of international mergers.
Merging companies and merging cultures, eh?
Exactly. I've done a lot of research into how international bank mergers can go terribly wrong if cultural issues aren't taken into account.
It sounds very interesting. I'll be sorry to miss it.
Well, in that case, I can always email you my slides from the talk.
If it wouldn't be too much trouble. Look, here's my card. And do email me if you have any questions about my line of investigation.
Well, I might just take you up on that. Here's mine. Please take a look at our website, Intercultural Consulting.
Professor Slavinsky, there you are. You're due to talk in 5 minutes.
Oh, hello, James. Let me introduce you to Melanie,
Burns, Melanie Burns.
Yes, hi.
Hello. So, are you a colleague of Professor Slavinsky?
I'm his research assistant, actually.
Couldn't do without him. It's been a pleasure talking to you, Melanie. You never know, we may be able to collaborate together sometime. Now, if you'll excuse me.
Yes, of course.
I've been looking for you everywhere, Conrad. What have you been up to?
Networking, James, just networking.
Unit 2. Training. Recording 2.1.
Rosa, how do you decide what type of training or development is needed?
First of all, I just observe and analyze a company's needs before deciding on the type of training required. You know, before setting up the actual courses and programs. I use various training exercises at this stage. For example, tower building and bridge building work well for evaluating potential leadership skills.
What exactly does tower building and bridge building involve?
They're group activities whereby the team has to build a tower or a bridge using just cardboard, a ruler, and some glue. You have an hour and a half to do it, and by the end, the team should have constructed a cardboard tower or bridge. The exercise is used to observe various skills such as teamwork, leadership skills, interpersonal communication, and so on.
What other training exercises might you use?
Well, there are also case studies for evaluating people's values. These case studies, they don't have any one solution, but they're useful for seeing how people react. Sometimes the case study can be very emotive. And people, they really get carried away with the exercise. Then there's another activity called the in-tray, which is used for assessing management skills.
The in-tray? How does that work?
You receive various emails and the phone calls, and you have to prioritize your workload. Then you get a message out of the blue that your mother has fallen sick, and you have to delegate, and so on. It's designed to see how managers cope under pressure.
And after assessing a company's needs, what kind of courses might you set up?
I tend to use more coaching programs, and very occasionally there may be a mentoring program.
Recording 2.2.
Could you explain the difference between coaching and mentoring?
Basically, when you coach people, you improve on their skills so that they can do a better job. People may already have the knowledge or basic skills to do something, but they don't know how to do it effectively. These skills may include many business management skills, such as negotiating, time management, preparing meetings and presentations, or organization. But coaching isn't only for managers. Anyone in a company might do this sort of program. The course can be intensive or over a long period of time, but the objective is to improve an employee's specific skills and improve company results.
Isn't mentoring also about improving skills?
Well, the original idea of mentoring programs, though, is that they are long-term career programs, which are specifically designed for a select few in multinationals.
So mentoring is more of an elitist training program then?
Yes, it is. It's usually for people with a lot of potential who will end up being managers in 2 or 3 years' time. The mentoring program is in fact only part of a bigger picture, because the participant or mentee may probably be attending other training and personal development programs, or he or she might be studying for an MBA, as well as working on various high-profile projects. Julie, mentoring programs are designed to retain talented people within the organization.
And how do you decide who the mentor is going to be?
We have to interview all the senior staff in the company, but the mentor cannot be the mentee's direct manager or boss. Usually, the mentor is someone who is high up in the company, who has a lot of experience and know-how, and very importantly, is someone who likes teaching and sharing knowledge. Mentors have to be excellent teachers. They invest a lot of time and energy. It's very difficult to find the right person. It has to be someone who can be objective if the mentee has a problem at work or comes for advice.
How long does a mentoring program last?
Usually about 1.5 years, but the mentor and the mentee may only meet once a month.
Recording 2.3.
Human Resources, Mel van der Horst speaking.
Oh, hello. This is Leonie Taylor. I'm coming to the staff induction day on Thursday.
Hello, Ms. Taylor. How can I help you?
Well, I'm coming to the induction course on Thursday, and I don't know what time it starts or which room to go to.
So you didn't receive the program we sent to you?
Well, no. I don't know if it got lost somewhere.
Not to worry. I can give you the details now. It starts at 9 a.m. in conference room B2.
Can I just check that? Did you say 9 o'clock?
Yes, that's right.
And the room was?
Conference room B2. Just ask at reception. They'll give you directions.
So that's B2. Thanks. And it doesn't matter if I haven't got a copy of the program?
No, don't worry. I'll bring some extra copies.
Thank you very much.
See you on Thursday, Miss Taylor.
Recording 2.4.
Hi, Mel. It's Pierre in reception. I'm very sorry, but there's a problem with the conference room bookings for Thursday. It looks like B2 is double booked in the morning.
What?
Well, we can't really ask the chairman to shift his meeting, but it's only occupied till 11 o'clock. You could use it afterwards.
What about the other meeting rooms?
Well, nothing is free all day. We could put you in B3 or C1 for the first part of the morning.
I think C1 is a slightly smaller room than B3, isn't it? We're going to need the space.
Look, I'm not sure which room would be better for you. Why don't you come down to reception now and get the keys to both, and you can see for yourself?
No, thanks. I'm sure B3 will be fine for a few hours.
Do you want to book it till 11 then?
No. Better put us down till 12 in case the chairman's meeting runs over.
Okay. I'll put you in B3 from 9 to 12, and I'll book you into B2 from 11 for the rest of the day. Thanks for being so understanding, Mel.
Don't mention it. One thing, though, I'll email the people who are coming about the room change, but they might not all read my message in time. Could you make sure that they know where to go when they arrive on Thursday morning?
Sure, Mel. I'll tell the others and leave a note in reception with the attendance list.
Thank you, Pierre.
Recording 2.5.
What's the next item? Ah, yes. As you know, there's a distinct lack of information coming from the sales force. And what information we do get is often too out of date to be of any use.
Yes. Well, Harry, there's a lot of problems with the current system. I mean, staff say that they just can't afford to spend time in the office completing what they see as a complicated database.
Yes, and it seems that the extra training for the regional managers was inadequate, which meant that they, in turn, weren't well equipped to teach their staff. We've also now got the sales team from Ridley's, and they've only had very ad hoc, informal training with the system so far.
You know, there are new solutions available now. We could use IPAC. It's like an upmarket Palm Pilot.
Oh.
How would that help?
Well, the sales team could record details directly in the shops. There's even a plug-in camera to take photos of product displays. The information is then uploaded via modem for analysis, and decisions can be made quickly according to the data. We could then produce reports and data in a more user-friendly format.
That certainly sounds interesting. I'd like to see a demo, and we need to look at the cost of implementation, of course. What do you think, Gabriella?
Well, I'm most concerned about what form the training will take. Given our experience with the present system, we don't want anyone left behind during implementation. And we need to make sure that the regional managers buy into this, or, as we've already seen, it won't work. We probably need to train staff up as quickly as possible.
Yeah, I agree. But my department can't undertake training on that scale in a short period of time. I'd like to suggest we hire the training firm Pollock. They've done a very good job running other IT training courses for us in the past.
Okay. Shall we start the ball rolling on this one then? Kamal, would you set up a demo?
Sure, I'll do that.
And while we're on the subject of training, we have a very experienced sales team here. But we have to look at updating their skills. I mean, there are people here doing the job for 20 years with very little, if any, formal training. And I'd say they really need some customer awareness training. You know, something that will help them become a bit more proactive in their approach to selling.
Yes, especially now that the two sales teams have merged.
That's another concern of mine. I know it's difficult for them to adapt to working with someone who used to work for the competition, and there's sometimes a distinct tension in the air. I don't get the feeling the teams are integrating well.
I suggest we find a way to accelerate the process and create a unified team more quickly. We could handle the training in our department, but I wonder if a more neutral organization would be better under the circumstances.
Unit 3. Partnerships. Recording 3.1.
On today's show, we're talking about public-private partnerships in the UK. My guests are the journalist Georgina Munro and Frank Watson, a management consultant. Welcome to both of you.
Hello, Richard.
Good afternoon.
So, what is the government's private finance initiative? And how is it different from other forms of collaboration between the public and private sectors in the past 20 years or so?
Well, before this initiative, public-private partnerships basically meant, outsourcing services. Take, for example, the case of competitive tendering for cleaning and catering services in hospitals. But now the PFI goes much further. It's become the government's main source of funds for new public sector buildings, and it basically lets the government build capital-intensive projects without increasing public spending.
Well, what kinds of projects are being financed by PFI? Can you give us some examples?
Oh, literally hundreds. And they're right across the spectrum of public services. Schools, hospitals, prisons, roads and waste disposal systems.
So it's gone far beyond small-scale projects.
Oh, yes. We've seen the size and complexity of PFI projects grow considerably over the past decade. In the early days, it would be a single building, say a school. Now the projects tend to be much bigger, maybe between 10 to 30 schools at once, or a combination of schools, libraries and community facilities at several locations as part of one contract.
Recording 3.2.
So, what's driving this level of public-private activity?
Well, the argument goes that the PFI allows new money to be poured into public services. Private companies put up the money, build the new hospitals or trains or whatever we need, and run them for 25 or 30 years. And in exchange, the government pays them rent and service charges and, of course, keeps the ownership of the assets.
And there's the added bonus that the private sector is more efficient, so it can run our public services more cheaply than the state could.
That's certainly the theory. However, a growing number of critics claim it could end up costing the public more.
How so?
They claim that many PFI projects have been designed to generate as much profit as possible for these private consortiums. The Edinburgh Royal Infirmary is an example of how expensive the PFI can be. The hospital cost £180 million to build and will cost £900 million to pay for.
Yeah, what critics fail to point out in that particular example, Richard, is that the £900 million fee that Georgina mentioned includes operating and maintenance costs over the 30-year contract.
Yes, but is it still likely that the building would be cheaper to build and manage if it were traditionally funded?
It may seem that way, but, you know, recent studies in the UK have shown that when the public sector funds such projects in a more traditional way, the time and cost overrun is much greater than when the private sector manages a project.
Georgina, what's your take on this?
Some say many of these new building projects are cheap-looking and will become run down and dated in a few years' time when the government will still be paying for them. The truth is, we won't really know the full cost of the PFI for another 30 years or so.
Well, thank you both. Our lines are now open to callers.
Recording 3.3.
I know that Olivo Benedetti has always offered us good quality and service, but couldn't you offer us a 5% discount, Giovanni?
But, Kathy, the quality of our packaging and the bottle design of our olive oil is simply the best.
Yes, you have great marketing, Giovanni, but many of our customers are now switching to Spanish olive oil. Frankly, it's good quality and much cheaper.
As I've told you before, we can offer you exceptional delivery terms.
Those special services would be nice, but we aren't going to order in larger quantities as there isn't the demand for it. Could you include these special delivery conditions at no additional cost?
I'm sorry, Kathy. That's not our company policy.
But you're going to have to make an exception to your policy if you want to continue with our business.
You drive a hard bargain, Kathy. I'll speak to my manager and see what I can do.
5%?
I can't promise anything, but it'll be somewhere in the region of 5%.
Recording 3.4.
Thank you, Dr. Armstrong and Mr. Zjaniecki, for agreeing to this meeting. As you know, public-private partnerships are a relatively new concept for us, and we appreciate the chance to exchange ideas and discuss your experiences in the UK.
Please, call me Karen, and I'm sure my colleague Stefan is happy to use first-name terms.
Yes, of course. How would you like us to address you?
Joseph is fine.
Well, Joseph, we'll be pleased to help in any way we can.
Thank you. Well, just to give you some background, until recently, the State Treasury has always financed our infrastructure projects. But we now need to consider other options.
Well, as you know, we're now using private capital to help us develop infrastructure projects.
Yes, that model of finance raises a number of issues which concern us. For instance, if you use private sector money to fund developments, does that mean, does the state risk losing control of the services?
That all depends on your government policy and EU regulations, of course. It really hasn't happened in the UK unless the government has opted for full privatisation, for instance, the telecom sector.
And when we negotiate any public-private deal, we make sure that we negotiate ownership of the assets and that the airport authority continues to operate airport services.
I see. And about funding. As the state cannot provide funding, what are the alternatives we could consider?
Well, public-private ventures come in many forms. You could ask commercial banks for loans or get a private company to invest in the project.
And what about negotiating interest rates with lenders?
We've found that banks offer lower interest rates over a longer timescale, but tend to want more guarantees from the government, or will ask for an insurance policy to be taken out. Whereas private investment firms are looking for a much higher rate of return in exchange for funding more risky ventures.
You mentioned that the option of full state finance is not possible. Is the Treasury going to meet some of the capital costs?
Yes, but we don't know what percentage yet.
And are you planning to put the contract out to competitive tender? I ask that because there are several large construction companies with international public-private experience that can take on a project of this size.
Yes, I agree. We need a company with a track record in managing this type of project.
Might I recommend that you also ask the tenderers to propose the method of finance of the investment?
Well, that's a very helpful suggestion, thank you.
Apart from the funding, the other big advantage of these partnerships is that the risk is shared.
In what sense?
Well, in an agreement, the private contractor can be made responsible for the building schedule.
Oh, so if there are delays, then the extra cost is met by the contractor, not the state?
In effect, yes. You need to negotiate risk allocation as part of the contract, obviously. We found that that's really helped to keep projects on schedule.
I can definitely see the benefits in such an arrangement. Now, shall we start the tour of the airport facilities, and then we can continue our discussion over lunch.
Unit 4. Energy. Recording 4.1.
To what extent is gas an environmentally friendly source of energy?
Well, gas is the cleanest fossil fuel, much better in terms of negative gas emissions than any other fossil fuel, such as oil and coal. But eventually it will be replaced by new environmentally friendly sources, such as solar energy or windmills. Unfortunately, any fossil fuel is limited by its existing reserves, although it's very difficult to say for how long we will have oil or gas. Recent studies estimate that we will have oil for 50 or 60 years, and that we'll have natural gas perhaps for between 100 and 150 years, but no longer than 200 years.
And do you consider the gas sector a prosperous one at the moment?
Oh, yes, it is, and it will remain so for many years, although the new regulations have made things more difficult for existing companies. That means that older companies that once had a dominant position in their national markets have now to compete with the new entrants.
So, how is the gas sector regulated in Europe?
Until recently, there was a dominant company in each country supplying gas by using their own network. In order to change this monopolistic situation, the new European regulations are allowing gas suppliers to sell gas to customers by using the existing networks in such a way that they do not need to build their own gas network to compete. This has brought about significant changes in our industry. One of them is that in order to avoid the monopoly of bigger companies, they've been forced to unbundle their activities. Unbundling means splitting their activities between different subsidiaries in such a way that they now have a subsidiary company for transport, another for distribution, and another subsidiary that deals with supply. All suppliers can therefore use the same gas networks and pay the same price for them.
We've seen a number of joint ventures and mergers in the gas sector. Why is that?
To a large extent, this is a consequence of competition and the unbundling of activities I've mentioned. This means gas companies are now looking for new activities in other sectors, activities that could be complementary to the gas business. The most obvious one is the electricity sector. Some gas companies are producing electricity, and in other cases, they simply supply electricity to their customers by using the network of existing electricity companies. In fact, electricity companies are doing the same, selling natural gas to their electricity customers.
And what other significant developments are we seeing in the gas sector at the moment?
Well, there is an increasing concern for security of supply. The European Union is highly dependent on external sources, mainly from Russia, Algeria, and the Middle East. This dependence on distant external sources implies significant risk. So, the European gas sector needs to diversify its sources of supply and to build large storage facilities to face temporary problems of external supply. In a country like Spain, for instance, they are now importing gas from 12 different countries, both as liquefied natural gas and by means of pipelines mainly from Algeria as well as France.
Recording 4.2. 1.
I noticed that the staff turnover in our Rotterdam branch is consistently higher than in other branches, and there have been a number of transfer applications from there recently. It could be that it's just a coincidence. Have you spoken to the manager there recently?
No, but as I understand it, they have a lot of work there at the moment.
I think it's too early to jump to any conclusions, but maybe it would be a good idea to take a trip over there and talk to him.
2.
It looks like we've sold out of aircon units already, and suppliers can't get any more to us until the end of the summer. By then it'll be too late. I phoned around and everywhere is completely out.
Yes, the hot summer has certainly been good for business.
It's a pity, though. We could have sold 3 or 4 times the number of units we did.
That's true, but who was to know it would be a record summer? You can't rely on the weather forecast, certainly not the long-term ones.
I know, but I think we should reconsider our order for next year.
Hold on, we don't know there's likely to be the same demand next summer.
Yes, but neither does anyone else. I think people will be keen to buy their aircon at the start of the summer, rather than run the risk of going without again. The only problem I can see is the storage space.
Look, let's sleep on it. We don't need to make a decision right away.
Recording 4.3.
I think
sure.
that.
Okay, let's move on to the next item on the agenda. Did you all get a chance to read the literature I sent you on energy efficiency?
Yeah, some of it. There was kind of a lot of stuff there.
Right. I suggest we start by defining the problem more clearly. I mean, we need to collect and analyze some data first. We should get a breakdown of our energy costs.
Sure, but we can start working on reducing waste right away, can't we?
Yes, okay. Do you want to discuss some ideas now then?
Yeah, why not?
Yeah, no,
Okay.
good idea.
I got a suggestion. How about turning the aircon down when personnel complain it's too cold?
I know what you mean.
No, hey, I'm serious.
And lighting, another big expense. Maybe we leave the lights on too long, inside and outside the store.
Yeah, that's right. Maybe we could use skylights to let in natural light.
Thanks, Bill. This is a really great start. We need to set up an energy management team to start working on these ideas. And we want to make energy saving a priority for everyone in the company.
What about when things start getting expensive, Joe? I mean, we can't afford to put in skylights or buy more energy-efficient refrigeration units overnight. A fridge that's 6 or 7 years old is due for replacement, but what if the unit's only a few years old?
Good point, Rajit. We're in a chicken and egg situation. We can decide we're not going to install new equipment and technologies until the benefits are proven, but we can't be sure of the benefits if we don't invest in the new stuff.
Sure, yeah.
A related issue is the company's commitment to improving energy efficiency by monitoring CO2 emissions. Our target is to reduce emissions by 10% in the next 7 years.
How are we going to do that?
Good question. That's another job for our new energy project team. There are, for instance, we could reduce our energy consumption by using more advanced refrigeration systems, but that's a big capital investment. We can also start buying some of our energy from renewable sources.
Okay.